And I learned about what Philippe and Juliette are up to in RSS, and I of course was delighted that some that there's this capability for change management. It's so close to my heart. And as I learned about how they're ramping up, and of course, similar to my experience in the past, you have so many more requests for support than you can actually respond to immediately, right? So you're trying to scale up your workforce. You also probably want a flexible workforce. It reminded me that maybe I should put Philippe in touch with Hermann, because I have been working with Hermann since 2011, I think. I got introduced to him through our old colleague Richard Delat, who was very influential with prototyping the ICE tool at the beginning. And I thought, hey, this could be something that could really help, not only with Transform D, but also within RSS and the change management capability building, to have something to support the various requests that you get. Because there's more than just a tool behind this. Just to be clear, it can help in projects. It can also be a wonderful co-creation enabler through transformation, and there's also scalable possibilities to consider with the Life Institute overall. So with that, I just thought, hey, I should introduce you guys. It might lead to something that is fruitful for all of you. Yeah, period. So that's kind of my connector role today. I'm delighted that so many of you came, and yeah, I maybe pass it over to you.
I am representing today Transform D because we have a concrete demand here to make sure that the change, I'm saying there's a lot of changes going on, but the one we're responsible for is the agile piece. So being agile, and then what does it mean in the different business areas? We want to have a pragmatic way to also make sure we track the progress we're making, and we can do these pulse checks and find out where is it that we need to act or react, and where do we stand, what's the overall health of the organization or maturity of the organization when changing, right? So this is where we need to probably tap into some intelligent tools that can help us to scale this.
Thank you very much. I am the founder, and I am the chair of the Institute, of the Life Institute for Viewpoints. These things, and I would say one of the key elements of our institute is partnership. From that point of view, what I present here to you, it is just some experiences what we made, some tools, and I invite you to ask whenever you have questions. Very short, as I said before already, I think working on viewpoints is more needed than ever. I will talk here about rethink projects, but you see in our 25 years experience, we work with coaching, which means rethink me. We help people to develop new viewpoints. We are working with teams, basically rethink us. It's something what Abby was framing really nicely. It helps to co-create a change or a transformation, because sometimes we come in with rethink projects, we start to measure, we start to understand how many things we could have made different if we would have involved the people up from the beginning. However, let's now dive into the topic of today, rethink projects. And here it's about how can we basically detach ourselves from our own viewpoints and use free text to get really, in an unbiased manner, the collective intelligence. I like to start to say, better don't reach out to anybody if you are reaching out only half-heartedly. Half-heartedly, in my eyes, is you make some checkbox questions, you set these questions in front of the people have the options what you were thinking up, and I don't say that you think up bad things, but what the people really mind, they cannot basically provide you, and if they provide you in, let's say, a comment field, we all know what happens with these comment fields, they just ignore it. The result of such an approach is, okay, the people are the so-called survey fatigue people. They don't want to really participate. And very often, if we come in organizations, we experience that in our first pulse, we have low response, and then it goes up to 50, 60, 70% because people suddenly realize there is something different on that. It's not just a survey, and it's not these tiring checkboxes. It's basically 4 open questions plus 1 closer question. So easy. And I often experience that the people say, hey, and amazingly, they are really interested in what I was talking to them. And that gives the power to it. It doesn't mean that nobody ever wanted to make that. I think all change makers, and I think Juliette, if you are from the OCM field, you know that you would like to, ideally, you would go out and interview everybody. But if you have thousands impacted people, that's very difficult. You would like to ask free text, but again, if you have 1,000 people telling you, and they don't just write 1 sentence, they don't write just 2 sentences. Sometimes they write, I'm not kidding, 10 pages A4 if you allow them to write. I have one nice memory of some lady who was writing, oh, not again such a survey. Her first statement, I will not provide too much because anyway nobody cares. And then she was writing approximately 8 pages A4. And then I saw that, I thought, oops, what would happen if she would like to provide much? But it was really great content what she provided. And the point here is, yes, the change makers, and I sometimes feel pity with them, they would like to have actionable data, but they don't have it. And they don't have any means to get really actionable data, because if you make a focus group, what happens? Usually you ask your line managers, whom should we invite to the focus group? And what happens? The line manager sends the people he knows that they provide their feedback, and maybe the feedback which is not too harmful to him. It's not no bad intent, but it happens. And from that point of view, again, you get filtered information, even if you make focus groups. Therefore, our experience is, if you have a possibility of reaching out to everybody, letting everybody tell, that's the power behind. And that's the reason why we developed all that. And of course, the decision makers. I am citing here some guy you all know, it's Werner Boeing. Werner Boeing was basically the entire IT transformation using not only this tool, he used it part of Rethink as well, still in the old look and feel. And Abby could tell you it's looking a bit different now. And he said, it's great that we use that ICE because it helped us to get a real perspective of the world, not that typical management perspective, which is far too nice picture. And I think that's the most powerful statement what you can say as a manager. But it also means, as a decision maker, you have to be prepared for honest feedback. If it's only about getting good grades, as I always say, please reflect of using our rethink projects, because we are digesting, we are bringing out the real numbers to really make a stimulus to change. Change doesn't happen from only good news. Good news are important, but just good news are a blocker. That's basically where we come from. This means if you now tell me, wait a moment, that's all. Something what we really would like to do, we would like to reach out full-heartedly to our people, to the impacted one. We really care what they say. We would like to be able to get actionable data out of them, and we would like to increase our response rates. Then you are in the right place. That's what I will present here. From that point of view, what I will now make a small demo are following points. They are basically, you see green highlighted, some of the features which I will talk you through the system, so that you have a feeling what we talk about. What I take here is a real life case. It's not from Roche, and it's, let's say, anonymized in a way that you cannot really find out which company it is. But it's a company from the pharmaceutical environment, and it's about clinical trials. I think all of you are familiar. Clinical trials are at the heart of any pharmaceutical company. And they were basically using our rethink projects after they announced new modus operandi, just to get an feedback about how is this new modus operandi, which they were working hard for, how is this perceived and how they can move on.
And this is so funny that the timing of this is so good, because you guys, I was just telling you, I work now in clinical operations, right? And we are going to have this conversation within clinical operations with Herman as well, how we can continue our engagement strategy with this in mind. So this demo is going to be very good for me as well.
Now let's have a look. We set up, we administered all this. I will not now make a big demo. We can talk about it if you really want to go for it. If you want to train people, being able to set that up yourself, then that's something. What I would like to talk with you through is the first thing, what happens? The people who are invited, they get the link. And this link they click. I started already to provide feedback, then some call was coming, I was stopping, and now I would like to move on. System tells me, wait a moment, the system knows that I'm speaking German, therefore it's coming up in German. Of course, if you have French, it will come up in French or in English, whatsoever. It says, wait a moment, you started already. We send you now an OTP so that you can continue your own survey. That's very important, because data privacy is something what we really matter. I have to go to my email. Just a second. I'm pulling it up. Okay, for the ones who want to see what the email is.
Maybe in the meantime, I just add the just to put some context. Everybody gets a personalized link. So and normally when you prepare these surveys, you have your list of recipients already in mind, right? It's not like you just send a link out to a whole bunch of people and whoever responds, you either know or don't know. So you actually have your stakeholders all listed, and you've gone through the process of thinking about what metadata is important to us in our database. Do we want to be able to slice and dice this by country, by role, by function, by user type, like by functional role, by system role? So you set this all up, and then you set up what's called like your trigger data, and you have the names, you have the phone number, you have the email. And this is why this is so important, why there's a link to data privacy, to make sure that these people actually do receive their personalized link. Because they might choose to stay anonymized. And if they choose to stay anonymized, you still have their information mapped to all of their metadata, just not their name.
And I think that's a very important thing, that feature, we have an opt-out feature implemented. This means you all know the Betriebsrat in Germany. He usually says yes to the ICE survey once he gets to know how it works. Why is he saying yes? Because he realizes it's up in the hand of the people and it's about improvement. This means, you see here, I started already to provide feedback. Let's finish the feedback, what I would like to provide, because afterwards I really work with this feedback. I can say, is it okay if somebody wants to contact you? I am saying now, no, I don't want to be contacted. I want to stay anonymous to basically show you what happens then. And I say, yes, you can afterwards. No, you cannot invite me again. This means if I say here, no, you cannot, in the next time when you send out the invites, the system knows, okay, Herman Ladner doesn't want to provide feedback. And saying that, I tell you something important. After we did that, we got so often the request in the second survey, why did nobody invite me anymore? What happened? The people were calling the help desk. The help desk was saying, hey, there must be a mistake in the system. No, there was no mistake in the system. The people said, don't contact me again. As this happens very often in this kind of surveys, because people realize their opinion counts, we meanwhile establish the possibility that customer service, where they are contacting, they can just say yes, invite that person again, and that person gets the link again. This means that's a very interesting observation what we have from so much about survey fatigue. People in organizations who were really survey fatigued, to say it like this, they wanted to be again invited. Why? Because they realized there is something different. The system does now following. It translates to the main language. The capability of that system is basically like this. You can invite the people to survey in their own language, and you can assign a classifier who maybe doesn't speak all the languages of the world. And from that point, a classifier in his area of the scope of influence, Abby made already the small introduction about the change agents, basically can say, I would like to classify now everything in my language. This means the system translates the English original feedback and translates it to German, and now makes a suggestion already to which bucket this would fit best. Here you see the English text. There are still a few unanswered questions that add to the confusion. The buckets for this demo I was putting in English so that you can better relate to it. And the system suggests to put it in this bucket. And I would guess, without even knowing too much about the context, that fits pretty well in here. How comes that the system makes this suggestion? The system is learning with every single assignment what you do. And with every single assignment, this is getting better. And what happens here, the system takes here the whole feedback and puts it in here. I will now just say, okay, I am assigning it and proceeding, okay? Now, there is no further answer to this question because I just made that survey, but for this question we have more. And now if we have a close look to that, what happens? The system splits up now this feedback, which is not only one, it is two statements in one single statement. And for this one single statement, it again suggests where it would fit in best. Of course, you can select, and if you do that several times, you know very well in which bucket to go. But again, here is written the planning security of the release increases, and this is impacting the workload. It's impacting the release planning, and both of them are very clear. It also impacts other areas. I can believe that as well. It has impact on results, and the system recommends us to put it in here. I just put it in here. But again, if you are now several hundred such comments you were assigning, and in the beginning you were thinking how you put up these buckets, it gets more or less an automatism. You move it in here, and you say assign and proceed. Now, system takes the next fragment and again suggests where to put it. Now it's only giving this and this as a possibility. And if you look, stress of all people involved will reduce. This surely has impact on the workload, but it's also on the results. As I know, I was already putting less stress as a result. Obviously, I will put it in here. System allows this, I can assign and proceed.
Hermann.
Yes?
So a quick question, can you only have one feedback to one classified area?
No, you asked that question in the right time. I will take one next question. You see here, system stops here. Why? Because it says, okay, maybe it's adding here. No, it's not adding. I add this here. This means prerequisite is that we find 2 weeks in our standard times. Now I can assign this here in one of these buckets, and don't click assign and proceed. I just click assign, and I assign it to the second bucket. I can also say, okay, Voraussetzung is that the standard prerequisite is that we find 2 weeks in our standard timelines. This means basically these are, let's say like this, these are 2 different statements. One is I have to make the Voraussetzungen. This would be now one of the possibility, and this means system recommends us to put it to implement in the modus operandi what we have to put. And now I don't click here, I click here assign. Now the system is putting it again here and say, okay, now you can also put standard site plane, and we can put it to any bucket in here. And again, it's most probably on the workload, and I can assign, and then it's in 2 buckets. I can put it in 3 buckets whatsoever. Yes?
And if nothing is assigned and you hit next answer, is it then automatically assigned based on the percentage?
That's a very good question, Philip. I can move to the next answer. This means I, at the moment, would not like to assign that because I have no idea yet.
Okay.
I can also tell the system from the moment, let's say like this, I would like to have some automatism inside. If that number is, there is only one recommendation, please automatically assign it to that. Then I don't even have to look at it. I can also put other rules in place how the assignment happens. Abby and then Juliet.
Thanks. Just in case it wasn't clear for you guys, these classification buckets, you can set up yourself in whatever way you want before you get started. So Juliette, when we were talking about this last time and you were like, oh, this is kind of like the ADCAR thing on steroids. If you wanted to, you could have your buckets be the ADCAR dimensions, right? Or you could have that plus other things as well. For example, if you anticipated comments to come back about the communications, training, definitions around agile, behaviors, like whatever it is, right? You can make your own buckets. And a huge improvement from the version that I used to work with to this is, in the past, you set your buckets and you classified against those. And if you found other things as you were going, it was pretty tricky to update and like update the buckets, particularly from cycle to cycle, as you might imagine, right? But here we have a lot more capabilities here to be flexible with the buckets or tags for classification. And they can be individualized to your project and updated. So for example, let's say that you tagged something with training and later you realize, oh, this is really more communication, and you had 200 comments. They can easily be reclassified and then continued in your cycle. And so you can update your database that way. So it's fully customizable.
Yeah.
So you could say, I mean, I'm just now thinking out loud, Thomas, if we say these are the benefits we're looking for actually ultimately with our agile ways of working, because it's not a means to an end, we're looking for certain benefits in the business. Can we, for example, assign that? And then the question is, how does this proposed assignment work if we can put in anything? So is that something that needs to be set up and programmed based on words or keywords, or how does that work?
No, Philip, Juliet, I come soon back to you, okay? Basically, the idea is the system observes you in your first classification. There is no individual setup necessary. I would strongly recommend you, taking now your example, I would not already make up my mind, let's put in this and these benefits. You take the very first feedback when I start, it's here empty, I have nothing. I take the first feedback system, divides that in single things, I start to make the first buckets. As I continue, I get smarter, like Abby said, and I maybe reform a bucket. I can make inside bucket, I can make chapters, I will come to that as well. This means the system is learning individual per change initiative, per project what you are supporting. And the nice thing is, it's also mapping on the impacted people. Take, for example, the diet people, there's Transform D, but there is ELN, there are other initiatives. Now, if, for example, you learned in ELN that some person in Mannheim is acting like this on the communication, next time when you come in Mannheim, impacting this paper with another change, of course, you can take that into consideration already. This means it's a database, a huge database in the very end, starting to get people analytics on viewpoints. With, unfortunately, in Roche, so far, you just do it from one project to the other. It has a little bit to do because there is no overall project capability. Therefore, every project decides itself, do we want this tool or not? And from that point of view, this benefit is not there. But if you, for example, have this tool as a standard tool, and then you start to understand what are the people in Mannheim, where in ATCA, for example, do they have most problems? Then you can, the next time when you are again a change impacts these people, you can take that into consideration. But coming back to your question, you basically form this based on the feedback of the people. And obviously, like you assumed right, here as well, release planning was one of the key parts of that new modus operandi. Therefore, this was getting a own bucket. Further impacts on where do we have this? Expected impact on other areas. There are inside 3-4 different buckets, because it is lessons learned, KPIs and so on are falling all in here, but it was not so present. Suddenly you start to understand how are the people associating your Transform D. And it might be different than you were originally thinking. It might even be more powerful. You don't have to program, and it's, as you see, it's not just, I would say, a stupid word analysis. It's more, the system is basically analyzing each bucket, how you assign it, and starts to take this thought into consideration, makes your recommendation. Is that answering your question?
Yep.
Juliet, you wanted to ask something?
I prefer not to ask my question now, because I see the timing, and I'd be really keen to see then what this then looks like as we move to the next stage of the analysis.
Okay, then let's move, let's stop with the assignment. Let's move back and say, okay, we made now all this classification, and we would like to tell stories, because we don't only make this classification just for the fun of classifying. Also, it's funny if you do it very often. But you would like to tell a story. You see here again the buckets, the topics, and for each of the topics you see here, and I didn't emphasize that before. The system also puts the connotation: is this something positive? Is this coming from somebody who is a promoter, a detractor, and so on? That meta information is in here. You can click now on one of these buckets, and here you can start to build stories. Here we made, for example, this is the default story, the question-based story the system just delivers to you. I'm not talking much about this now, but here there's a story what the person who was assigning, when you assign it, when you work with all these feedbacks, immediately they're starting to develop pictures in your mind. And instead of now waiting till you classified everything, you can already start making your chapters of the story. Exactly this happens. This means the person started to already, as he classified here, all the single feedbacks, he started to put it already in part of a chapter. You can imagine like a book about this topic. Let's say here a book about what we need to do next, implementing this modus operandi. And the chapters are, we have to clarify open questions, we have to establish principles, we have to manage the translations and so on. I don't know whether something is coming in here. You see, this is something what I was now assigning on the fly with you. And I can ask the system to suggest, based on all the work what was done so far, in which of these elements would this fit in best. This means, ich muss Voraussetzungen, I think this is what we made together. I can look again here, what is in the whole context. I start to understand it, and then I say, okay, wait a moment, if I have to establish the Voraussetzungen, establish principles fits pretty nice. I will put it in here, I will include this and tell save the story. This means now I have the story saved. I'm now going back, because I heard just now from Abby that you are familiar with ATCA. Okay, in fact, I know that you're familiar with ATCA because we supported the OCM implementation with Abby and Richard as well. This means I can tell an ATCA story. Telling an ATCA story is only basically meaning I take these dimensions in here and have a look how are all these feedbacks, all this matching in here. I can put this away and say, okay, wait a moment, based on all this, what we made, where would this fit in best? System makes some calculations and then says it could be knowledge, it could be also ability, it could be awareness. And you know, if there are many questions open, depending on where I am, it can exactly fall in one of these topics. And that's basically how I can really start to work with that feedback. I can start to make stories. I can basically add a whole article about. If you use the Rethinking Cloud links your article with the people who were co-creating this article. And who are these people? Basically, if there's a fragment of mine, use it to make an article, I was to some extent co-creating this article. That's, of course, a very nice way again of pulling attention, giving ownership of that change to the people who provide it. And that's one of the reasons why the people are very fascinated by that, because they start to realize their opinion really matters.
Mm-hmm.
Just to add, what the tool's done here is also some of these comments may have been in one answer before. So it's now what we didn't have before. It's actually separated everything out in one statement, which then you can drill down in your dashboard analysis, which is coming next, I bet, to show you like how you can get a snapshot of your progress and then how you can show your progress later.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it actually, it makes everything its own piece of data, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Considering the time, I would just now move back, say, okay, let's save this, and let's have a look what the management really wants to know. The management doesn't necessarily want to work on all this. They would like to see some dashboards. They would like to see a little bit how or what happened with all this data. Here you see at one glance, real life numbers, minus 30.36 from the Net Promoter Score. You see 59 people were surveyed in that area. You see 470 comments were processed in 6 topics. You see quality is still the best, and it goes down with development, goes down to CTSO. You can, of course, change different dimensions, look at up and down from the dimensions. You see here the comment areas, how many positive, how many negative, how many others. You see here response rates, follow-up OKs, and contact again. You see basically the engagement of the different departments on that. And you can go to the topic score. This means if you remember, each of these fragment belongs to one topic. Each of the fragment is somehow connected with a feedback. You immediately see here, minus 21.4, that's compared with all the rest, still very positive topic. If you go down here, expected impact on workload, the people who were giving feedback here are much more negatively considering that. This means you have a nice overview on that. You can again go to different stories if you have different stories. Here I have only one insight. You can go to different dimensions. You can go topic per dimensions. You have a look how it is basically going here. For example, you see pretty many were contributing here, some positives, some negatives on the modus operandi. This means it gives you a very fast overview on a glance, and you can assign all that to the different departments, to the different areas, to the different dimensions, like Abby was saying. Do we take functions? Do we take countries? Do we take involvement? Do we take all this into consideration?
And so you can slice and dice it based on all those different angles, right? So if you wanted to create this dashboard by region or by country or by role, you can do that. And so you can really drill down and find out, like, how do I want to consider, you know, the NPS results? And how do we want to frame these viewpoints? Is it by function, like on this one, or do we, you know, is it helpful to look at it by role or by whatever other metadata?
And considering the time very short, but basically Abby was saying, I used that also to liaise with people who were detractors. If I do this very timely, the people can turn their opinion immediately. I am making here focus areas, and just for that real life example, you remember, it was not looking very good, minus 26.8%. It was moving up to plus 3.8 within 4 months. What happened? We worked systematically with the detractors. We were basically making focus areas, implemented them immediately, the quick low-hanging fruits, and we communicated back. This means the people started to really feel part of it. This means, basically a very small summary. If you do it like this, you know the opinion on the people know their opinion matters. The change makers have very timely and actionable information. You can break that down according to your cascade that change. If you said Aspire before, I think Aspire would benefit tremendously if they would take this tool and use their OCM network, what they have, to basically assign each OCM person one area, and they are working with the feedback. and the decision makers have a realistic picture on it. This means you can cascade your change, you get here the feedback, and you can decide where do you want to assign. These are basically projects within Roche what Life Institute was supporting so far. Here's a feedback from Werner Boeing. And yes, you mentioned ATCA before. We consciously didn't design ATCA in the tool, but we give the possibility of any kind of change management methodology. Some people use ATCA, others use Kotter, others use other things. You can design in whatever you want to have as a change methodology. You can put your phases in, and you can assign your comments to your phases. That's basically how all this is working. I now was hurrying very much through. I hope I didn't lose all of you.
The other thing I would just add to this page is, so you might recognize these images from the change training that Richard and I made. So it's an example of partnership. But the point is, the reason why this change agent network is kind of important to think about is oftentimes on large transformations, you really do need other people to have tangible tools to help manage the change. And so while the core team or the core change leads might be using this tool, you can also have the regional change leads having access to the tool and really managing that part of the pie, right? So like if you imagine this change agent network and like each, let's say regional lead were in charge of one of the lines of sight, right? And it really empowers people to have the data and to be able to follow up with people and to also report either locally or regionally.
So one statement, maybe a bit of a challenging one. So basically what you're doing with the tool, you're asking the person that you're surveying to provide not just free text information, but then also help you classify it in a way that, right? So that classification that you showed, Herman, is what the person needs to do that is answering the survey, or did that make
No. That classification is done by the change agent.
Yeah.
Okay. So
I think the people would not love to classify their own feedback.
Exactly. No. Okay, good.
The whole point is you don't want to project anything into their heads, right? So they answer the free text, and those couple, follow up. Are you a manager? Would you like? So the one quantifiable question, and then the rest is free text, basically. And then what Herman was showing you is how we make sense of that on our side. Okay. So we take that qualitative data and we further qualify it to get the insights, and we can quantify it.
All right.
Without the recipient knowing, oh, they're asking me now about performance. Oh, they're asking me now,
I was hoping for that. Yeah. And
yeah, that's what it is.
Okay, yep. So I just declare. And then the other question, maybe Herman. So I'll be very open here. When I talked to colleagues from Aspire, they said, well, we already have a survey tool that is very widely used in Roche, and it's the Geos Pulse. There is a provider, I forgot the name. Now, how does this differentiate towards what a Geos Pulse can do with that we're also working closely with in Roche?
I call your attention to this here. FPP Geos follow-up.
Just going to say.
Basically, Geos is a very nice tool, but unfortunately it's bucket and it makes benchmarking based on some assumptions. Now, if you want to do that, that's fine. But if you want to accompany a change, the problem is you again, I would say, put the thinking of the people in some buckets and hope that there's coming something out. And as this Geos was not providing actionable data, this means we knew then, or Richard knew, and I think you were part of it. No, that's a Geos dimension where we are not good in. But we didn't really know why. And we didn't really understand what the people's thoughts were behind. This means we were following up the Geos feedback with an ICE process or rethink project.
So it was Peter Johnson at the time who realized, oh, well, Geos is telling me I have a problem, but I don't really understand what to do about it now. And so we did the follow-up the ICE following up Geos. And I believe Werner has also done, or that's one of the reasons why Werner already did it in the IT transformation, because I believe at that time he was still part of the FPP before he went over to DIA. So anyway, Geos doesn't really give you very engaging, actionable data?
Basically, GEO's philosophy, like many other benchmark philosophy, is a completely different one. To really run benchmark, you have to have an idea about what you want, what you think is making engagement. And then you just try to match everything in here. And here, our belief is, if you transform, you are going into completely new thing.
Yeah.
If you go into the completely new thing, ready-made buckets is a very dangerous thing, because how can you anticipate everything what the people might experience and think about? And that's the reason why we go in this direction.
Okay. Last question, maybe very practical one, potential setup time. If we would say, all right, let's get started, what's the lead time that we're looking at here?
The longest time is at your side with your procurement. When I set up, usually it's and you have your change agent structure, your change agent network, and so on in place, and all these thoughts were done. And it's just setting up the system that it supports completely your change agent structure. Then it takes not even 2 days.
Okay.
From my experience, I would just add, the problem is not on Life Institute side. It really is like understanding what is the question we're asking. What is that powerful question? Is it a recommend? Is it confidence? And confidence in what? And how do we want to tie it to our strategic purpose and vision?
That's
and
the key element.
Getting your sponsors, steering committee, and whatever, whomever aligned to that they all have confidence in this process. That takes a couple of iterations internally. Then you also might want to start like before you do this process or launch it, you might want to make sure that your communication strategy and your communication plan triggers this, right? So that there's something happening, there's some kind of buzz, they've heard of something. Then you might want to think, when does it make sense to launch this? So from a change lead perspective, it takes a little bit of thought and planning, and then aligning team members around what we're doing here.
As I said, the setup is basically just when all this is clear, what Avi said, you have it done basically in some hours.
Yeah, it's the homework that takes time. And global procurement, I know it well enough.
Yeah. From that point of view.
Since we moved to Workday, it might be a challenge getting the names, as we discussed last time, right? I mean, we used to be able to just pull all of the information out of Chris. I don't really know how to do this currently in Workday. That's something that we might need to follow up with HR, how we get that employee data.
Well, for this purpose, I have a good news. We have now a capability in place where we can say we make an opt-in, and we make generic links for whatever dimensions we want to make. This means we can structure, for example, that's the function X, human resource in Bensberg for diagnostics. And all the people get this link, and who is human resource Bensberg diagnostic can opt in. There's coming the one-time password to check whether there's not a robot or something else. This means really the people's feedback, and like that we get the server back, because I know Workday didn't make the life easier.
Yeah. Good. All right, Herman, I think conscious of time and busy schedules for all of us, I wanted to not miss the opportunity to say thanks a lot for the preparation and for sharing more insights with us. It really looks like something personally I'd love to have. I especially like the dashboards and the way we can, I think that would save a lot of time to also make sense of data, right? Which is where we can sometimes waste time and then not even get to the right stories. I think this is something that I find is very powerful in people. And I think the level of what we would have to put into it in terms of managing, then also classifying the answers, I think that's doable, feasible. Anyway, we would have to go through and work with the pre-text comments we would get from any site, right?
Yeah.
So thanks a lot. We will definitely, I'm looking here now at Sri, Adrian, Thomas, myself, we will definitely have to discuss this and take this further. It would be great if you could share the slides with us, if that's okay. And then I would assume we would get back to you, but that's not going to take half a year because we're already starting that change process. Things are already rolling. So I'd rather say we're on the late side rather than on the early side.
I'm looking forward. As I said, I didn't show about this. Here, a very small statement. The director of operations in ZHW mentioned like that. Since 2007, I wanted to become more agile with my people. Now we are working. This was in June 2019. They worked with us basically 4 months. In these 4 months, what we did is we used rethink us, and suddenly the people came up from the middle management, which is not very well known with very agile attitude, came up with agile way of working. And that's basically what I could talk about rethink us. If you're interested, we can make up a new date. I can share that success story as well. Absolutely no problem.
Why not? I mean, I'd love to learn more, Herman. Yeah,
I'd agree.
I'd love to learn more. So I think Juliette, you as well, right? Really be interested to see what you're doing else. But
okay.
Good. So
thank you very much for your time.
Reach out. Yes, thank you, and thanks everyone who joined. And we'll catch up probably on Monday, right? Sri, Adrian, Thomas, and this. Yeah. All right.
Perfect.